Okay, we are live with Ted Bird. Today, Ted is going to discuss innovative fundraising, a topic that a lot of people are interested in. I want to say Ted is an exemplary BoneChat member. He's helped build both large ortho spine companies and startups, and he's genuinely a helpful person. So he's the perfect person for the community. So welcome, Ted, and I'm handing you the mic.
Thank you, Tiger. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to February 1st, 2024. Pleasure to spend some time with you this afternoon. And talking with Tiger, he mentioned three consistent themes and areas of interest that come up are funding, for startups and for young companies. Reimbursement is an issue that needs to be considered as early as possible for many of these companies. And I'm sure many of you, and I know I have my scars, on my back from learning, in the process about, what to do, what not to do. And the third one is, how to build, a sales force and commercialize, how to be effective and successfully commercialize your technology. There's not enough time, this afternoon. I plan on talking for about 30 minutes and then leave it open for dialogue and conversation. So as I was putting some slides together, I'm just going to focus on fundraising and really kind of explore the different options that are out there for companies today in an environment today that is very, very difficult in the last couple of years. So that's what I plan to cover. I'm going to share my slides and just go through it. So let me see if I can get this up and running here.
Well, while he's doing that, don't be bashful. Ask questions in the middle. Raise your hand or just blurt out a question.
Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, great. So it's a long mouthful of a title. So it's about fundraising. Let me just cover my background real quick. It's not. There we go. So I have 4 decades of experience in orthopedics. I think I have about 18 months where I wasn't in orthopedics. So I'm kind of an orthopedic industry lifer, proud to be. And, primarily commercial roles, global, not just US, but sales, marketing, strategic planning, business development, education, executive leadership, and most recently, throughout my career, but most recently with a continued focus on management consulting and board roles. Across the space, I started my career in arthroscopy, sports medicine with companies that those names are no longer current, but those of you that have been around for a while will recognize Dionix and Richards Medical. They're now part of Smith & Nephew. J&J Orthopedics, I had various roles in those arthroscopy and sports medicine areas with those companies. Trauma and extremities, I had responsibility for that area with J&J Orthopedics. This was pre-DePuy Synthes, when it was J&J in New Brunswick, New Jersey, as a group product director for their trauma and then also their fracture management and soft goods and all their casting products in orthopedics. Really out of my 40 years, my deepest experience is in spine, over 30 years now in spine. Through the 90s, mostly I was with Danik, which became Software Danik, which became Medtronic. Had a 3-year hiatus from the big companies, where I started my consulting after the Medtronic acquisition, and then got pulled back in by J&J with DePuy Spine. Spent another second tour of duty with J&J at DePuy Spine, and then Blackstone Medical, which was acquired by Orthofix, really part of the Orthofix team that acquired Blackstone Medical and developed the spine division there. ApiFix in a role as the chairman of the board, as they were raising money before they were sold to OrthoPediatrics. Titan Spine as chief commercial officer before they were sold to Medtronic. And today I operate as a member of the management team for company called Dimacron in Salt Lake City, Utah, that has an artificial cervical disc. I also run Bird Medical Group, which is a management consulting and a go-to market commercialization solutions provider. So just through the industry knowledge, the network, the relationships with KOLs, with distributors, with GPOs, pretty much anybody in the industry, my strength is my network. And that's what I like about communities like this, like BoneChat, to help companies implement commercial strategies successfully. So the topic today is raising funds. Let me downsize this. So I kind of outlined, these are 9 areas. If you think from a early, seed stage startup, it could be a surgeon with an idea that wants to start his own company, or an individual. Here, these are the different kind of early to later stage. It's not really in that order, but between bootstrapping, grants and awards, non-dilutive grants, working with family office and individual investors, angel investor networks, the charitable net grant or award options, incubators and accelerators, working with them, which I have my own experience actually with the University Tech Transfer Group here in Charleston, South Carolina, for a couple of years. And of course, venture capital and what goes with that. And then the corporate venture capital, how to strategize around working with that to get needed funding, but also to kind of set up a long-term relationship for maybe a potential exit. And then equity crowdfunding, which is relatively new, particularly for med device, that I have direct experience with in the last year with Dimacron, where we went out and did an equity crowdfund raise last year. So dive in. Next slide. So bootstrapping, this is where you're basically using your personal savings. This is early stage, company credit card, or relying on revenue you can generate from the startup to fund your growth. It does offer the advantage is complete control, avoids the dilution of equity, but very limiting in terms of your ability to grow. And if you have high operating expenses, may not be viable beyond just getting things going. Again, ideal for startups in their early stages or those with low capital requirements. Jump in if there's any examples. Tiger, can you think of, you maybe have heard of, a company or two that started this way, where the founder, or others on the call, through bootstrapping, but it'll only take you so far if you have big plans.
Yeah, every milestone generally costs you more money as you go up. And you can hit the wall pretty quickly with just bootstrapped, unless you can get sales, in the first 6 months or something.
Right. So this is an area, grants, and I've sort of identified different options. There's government options, and kind of focusing on the U.S. There's a whole world of other opportunities outside the U.S. that I have less experience with, but through working with different companies, I know that, for example, Israel, they're really good at getting. The government is, the state of Israel has this innovation, department that provides tremendous, grant opportunities for Israeli startups. But here in the U.S., there's the small business, investment and tech transfer, loans, and there's various consultants and people that are experts in this area that will advise early stage startups on the process to do grants. And the other one on the top is the DoD, Department of Defense, non-dilutive funding. So if you're particularly an orthopedic solution that it makes sense is going to be attractive, you think about for the military, then look into that. It's a pretty easy kind of a Google search to find, or LinkedIn search to find experts in these different areas. I have some exposure to SBIR when I was doing the university tech transfer work here in South Carolina, because we were dealing with a lot of the just university people that were looking to kind of take their ideas beyond the tech transfer department at the university, and there are various advisors that are experts in that. The two companies down below, Grant Engine and FreeMind, are grant uh, expert organizations that you can basically hire to help uh, seek out grants and write grants and get it done. So there's various programs, and I've had various proposals from both of them. FreeMind is very active in various investment conferences where they provide um, startups or entrepreneurs, discounts because they're a sponsor to the different conferences, investment conferences. So take a look at, if you haven't any familiarity in the past with FreeMind or Grant Engine, those are a couple. Next box is family office and individual investors. That's usually where most startups go, is to, I call it friends, families, and fools. F cubed, and this is where you get your family, you get your friends, you get your network involved in your business to support you. But the key, here, and this is part of fundraising in general, you always have to be fundraising. As a founder, as an entrepreneur, it's just, you can never really have enough dry powder. So you need to be networking. It's network. Look for the opportunities to get involved. My experience with family offices, there are a couple of different organizations that offer a service of where they have a collection of family office. And one is FON, Family Office Networks, and this is an advertisement they do for their Palm Beach group, where they do mixers, and they're back to doing those again. I got to know them during the COVID years, where everything was online, including investment pitches and conferences, which were, in my experience, pretty useless. But now that the real way to network is to do it in place and in face to face at different conferences. And generally, family offices are less formal in their approach than venture capital. They're often mission driven, independent, and you should look for, if you've got a company that has a certain focus or approach, or is a good fit for a family office or group that it's all about whatever the theme is they're investing in. It might be female founded or diverse organizations, female run organizations, that they want to have diverse investments. There are various family office, and there's actually some VC funds that have that as well. So it's good to research that and make sure you're a good fit. You're not trying to put the square peg in the round hole with the group you're looking to work with.
Ted, do the family offices, do they advertise their mission openly, or do you? Okay.
Not always, but that's where the networking comes in. And you can find, in my experience, there's a couple of sort of databases that are out there, people that have put together, and I've seen them and asked for a copy of them on LinkedIn, of the latest list of family offices, and there's some that are lists of VCs, and I've got a couple of those. I'm happy to share that. It was public information, so Tiger, happy to share that to the BoneChat community, because it's worth looking at that, because it really takes an effort, as anyone that's fundraising right now knows, to get it done. I mean, it really takes, I would say, probably 100 pitches before you can really realize some kind of decent return on your target. You can't expect to get it done with just 5 to 10 pitches. So you got to keep at it. The fifth bullet point here is individual investors. Here in orthopedics, oftentimes your solution may be you've got a surgeon that's the inventor that's involved with, or you're partnering with, and usually our network of distributors or people that are knowledgeable, like this group at involved with BoneChat, um, are great, individual investors to kind of get involved. And it's a good idea to set up a simple SPV, which stands for special purpose vehicle, that is a simple way to do to get your initial tranche of investors. And once you get those people to understand the clinical need you're solving and are passionate about it, that's great way to kind of build momentum. And momentum is so critical in fundraising, not just through institutional sources who you've already got, investors. You put the mechanics together of having, a well-organized company, um, and a board of directors, good governance, good control. Um, I'm not going to talk so much about best practices. That's a whole nother talk, Tiger. I think that would be great to put together as best practices in building your company or your startup when you're fundraising. Things you need to think about: your quality system, your governance, your compliance approach. All things that um, get looked at in diligence from investors or ultimately in acquirers.
Ted, I think one thing should be noted, particularly with the surgeons, uh, hospitals or through hospitals are no longer allowing surgeon owned or surgeon equity held companies to get on contract. And so a majority of the companies, unless you're public, but a majority of the time they're forcing the surgeons to be bought out of any type of equity agreements. Do you agree? Have you seen that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Some of the bigger, GPOs and networks forbid it, but there are ways. Many surgeons, set up a separate um, investment fund, and if you set up a special purpose vehicle that is not really specific to your company, there's ways to kind of group the investments that way so that it's not a direct investment. It's an indirect investment through this special purpose vehicle approach. I've seen that be a strategy that is done where surgeons really want to invest, but they're not allowed to because they're employees of a hospital or a network. There's ways to do it through SPVs, but always check with your attorney. I'm not suggesting you try and take a shortcut or skirt the rules, because that becomes painful for everyone later. And the last thing you want is you or your loyal surgeon friend, on the front page of the local newspaper or the national newspaper.
Yeah. Hey, David, what's your perspective as both a clinician, hospital owner, and entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, it is a problem. It's not a universal problem. And I think it really comes into the strategy. Trying to go for a lot of the big name places is not a good strategy when you start, because you're going to be in Death Valley. You're going to wait too long. So if you go to the smaller institutions, ASCs, you can really bypass those particular problems. And there's no way you're going to do a national launch as a startup regardless. So you better be very targeted, and you just have to know which targets to go after.
Great advice.
The next box is the angel investor networks, and these are a few. They're everywhere. So depending on where you are, look locally. Usually each town or state has got a group. Whether or not they do med tech or life science, but these are a few that I know do life science. There's the Bay Area Angels. There's the Life Science Angels. Central Texas Network. MD Angels is a group, for example, of MDs that look at deals. And the Keiretsu Forum, which Alyssa, you would mention, and I actually attended that Northwest group that did a webinar on how to pitch successfully to our angel groups at Keiretsu. And the lady who did that is very, very direct, very, very good. They charge a fee if for you to apply, and they charge you a fee if you make it to go through their process. But keep in mind that generally these are going to be smaller tickets. These are going to be, you know, six-figure, tickets, $100,000 or so. You're not going to get, millions of dollars from your angels, but this is a kind of a step in the process for you to build momentum and to kind of get you to that next step. Any thoughts or feedback from the group on this area?
How does your pitch change, Ted, from bootstrapping, there's no pitch, but family office to angel, and then we'll get to Series A eventually.
Well, I don't think it changes too much, Tiger. And in
Okay.
my opinion, is the fundamentals still need to be there. You have to just keep it focused on the solution. Keep it simple, and telling a story that you are really solving an unmet clinical need, getting it clear, not getting too technical in the weeds on it, and telling a story about the company, about yourself, because these people are investing in, you often hear the analogy, the jockey, as much, almost more than the horse even. And so they want to know that who's involved, on the day to day. And then as you get more sophisticated with institutional investors like venture capital, you have a lot more metrics you probably put into your pitch, around your company. But knowing, particularly if you're at a commercial stage, you need those details about your company. But that's a whole nother talk, I think. Pitch decks and how to do them, because I've seen quite a few in the last few years, and some of them, if you go over 12 to 15 slides max, usually you have maybe anywhere from 6 to maybe 8 minutes. It's way too much information. So there's a good kind of simple formula to stick to.
Ted, would you, everybody has an opinion about pitch decks. Every single person. I've modified mine, and I have probably 40 slides that I cater to whomever. But I thought personally the Keiretsu presentation was the most on point and valuable. And what was nice about her was she would color outside the lines. She said one of the best presentations that she had seen had like 40 slides on it, but they were able to accomplish it in 10 minutes, and they got their message across, and she couldn't have seen it done any other way. And so yeah. I would actually go again. I take that little 1 hour again out of my, I think it was very, very valuable, no matter where you are in your pitch.
No, it's really good. And a medtech conference that I've been to for the last 3 years is called, and you see it on LinkedIn a lot, it's Life Science Intelligence, LSI. I pitched there 3 times now. The great thing about LSI, they're really active in their sort of social media and marketing, and they provide, it may be free if you go to the LSI website. You can get access to videos of the various companies that pitch there. So you can kind of look at how other companies are doing it. You can even go by specialty area. You can put down orthopedics in a filter and look at all the orthopedic companies in the last couple of meetings and kind of see, how these different folks do it over an 8-minute period. So I found that to be helpful, particularly as I'm preparing for a conference and a pitch, to see, people in my same space and kind of make sure that I'm at least on point with respect to the market size, the market opportunity, and things like that, and the message that's coming across. So that's a resource for you to look at. On the charitable grants, I don't have a lot of experience with this. This is probably more for surgeons, or scientists. You guys are all familiar, I'm sure, with OREF and AOSSM, the SOMOS, Society of Military Orthopedic Surgeons. They have various, annual, awards and grants to help early seed stage companies. And then I came across this one, Pure Tech, Giving Life to Science, and that's basically a nonprofit venture fund, basically to provide life, for companies, in the valley of death to get through, and come alongside, not so much of a incubator, but more of a nonprofit group. So it's worth looking into the pure tech. And Tiger, I assume you'll share these slides so people will have this, in the
Yeah.
future to be able to, take these different organizations and just go look them up.
Yeah, we're recording the call, but we can upload the slides to BoneChat Slack.
Okay, then also, this is, a very active space, and it's worth, again, for early stage companies to seek out and take a look what's out there in terms of incubators or accelerators and programs like MedTech Innovator. They do a cohort every year of at least, I think, 20 companies, and you apply to get accepted into that cohort, and they come alongside and provide tremendous resources and mentorship to a network of subject matter experts and consultants, and on your pitch, on your regulatory, your quality, your clinical, or commercial, needs as a company. But look locally. Each area these days have various incubators. So just put in wherever you are in your state or local or region about medtech or life science incubators and accelerators. In Houston, this Texas Medical Center is well known for being a great incubator source for the Houston area. Of course, corporately, J&J, has their JJDC Development Corporation. They've got J Labs. They offer all kinds of resources for startups where they, I get invited to all their various webinars and things that they do, but they offer, pitch options, and they can help make the introduction to the right person for the right company within J&J. Of course, orthopedics, that's the Pew Synthes. So, most of us either work there or know people there to go directly to them, but that's one. And then Startup Health I think was the #2 incubator on the top 15 list last year, is another one to look at. They can even give you a workspace and access to equipment and software. Okay, so venture capital. I found some ugly pictures of vultures here. One with blood dripping
very appropriate
off his beak. But it's been a horrible few years, dealing with venture capital. There's some great venture capitalists, or maybe some on the call here, that are great partners with great experiences. A lot of orthopedic people that have gone into venture capital, and there's a few orthopedic focused venture capital funds as well. But in the last few years, VC funds, the whole word venture is kind of a misnomer. It's they don't really want to take any risk. Most of these, it's very rare that you can find a venture capital, a VC group that is willing to take on particularly an earlier stage company or project, particularly if it's a class 3 that has to go through an IDE or PMA study. They don't have the timeline to go 7 to 10 years and $50 to $100 million to do a IDE. They generally want to be growth capital. So if you've got your regulatory pathway all set, they're happy to jump in and be like this vulture with the blood off the beak there. The last money in and the first money out. But they generally they're beholden to their members. And Tiger, you said at the beginning, there's this general feeling coming out of JP Morgan that it's time for a resurgence. There is money that's been sitting on the sidelines, and these guys, these firms, these funds are beholden to their members. They have to put the money to use, and there's a lot of money that's been stacking up because they've been pretty risk adverse. But generally they have, my message is spend time networking, spend time really researching, the different firms, because you can look at their websites, you can find out what their criteria is. Always research the group. A warm introduction is always better than a cold call. These guys get approached by hundreds and hundreds of tens of hundreds of companies, every month. Don't try to do the square hole in a round peg, engagement approach. So if you don't fit their scope, just move on to another fund. There's lots out there. Most of them have an average 5, to 10-year timetable. They raise the capital, they identify the deals, they manage the portfolio, then they want an exit. So if you're expecting longer than that, there's a very small minority that are long-term investors, and they have clear expectations on their internal rate of return on investment. Depending on the stage, they might want anywhere from 20x return on investment for early stage to, if you're lucky, a 3 to 5x ROI for more of a late stage entry. But
Mark
go ahead,
Viscogliosi made a really good point that you have to note the timing of the VC fund. So they're, it's a 15-year horizon, and they're raising money for the fund. And once the fund is fully capitalized, then that's the perfect time to meet with them. If you're too late or you're too early, you're gonna miss the wave.
Yeah, so get that information on the funds, that make sure no point in calling on them if they don't have an active, funds
Exactly.
to invest, or they, the fund is old and already invested, or they're not ready to invest yet. So those are good questions to ask.
Another thing that my experience is they're looking for home runs. They're not looking for a double or a single. And so if you can't show there's $1 billion, opportunity, in market, then they're not even going to talk to you. They're swinging for the fences, and they're only gonna hit a home run 1 out of 10 times, and that's fine for them.
Yeah. Again, this is just, one box in those 9 boxes I put down at the beginning of the presentation, but we're hoping that they start doing more risk and more venturing than they have in recent years coming up. And then, corporate venture capital, the big in orthopedics, there's the big 3 or 4, there's J&J, Stryker, Zimmer Biomet, of course, Medtronic on the spine side. And my message here is engage these partners early, just to start the relationship. Generally these larger organizations change a lot. So you do need to regularly stay in touch with them to determine that the person you were dealing with is still there and not in a different seat, in a different division, or left, or affected by a RIF, lately. But the message coming out of the corporate folks, the business development folks, and my experience from sitting in those chairs is, they want to hear about the deals. They want to understand the landscape, and generally they're kind of hesitant to sign an NDA. They want non-confidential information, but it's a good idea to find out for your company and your product and your solution, who the players are in these different companies. Engage them. Go to AAOS or AOSM, AOSSM or ANA or NAS, and start that relationship. Boston Scientific, I made their logo bigger than anybody else because they are, famous in the past few years for just doing deals. Incredible. They've paid, $500 million for Vertiflex, for an interspinous process spacer, and unbelievable. And they bought Axonics recently for $800 million. Relievant, so in the pain area, in the pain management area, it's a very hot space right now, and Boston Scientific is really carving out a leadership space in that area. Okay,
Mark,
so
Mark's got a question. Go ahead.
Okay.
So I have a kind of a cautionary tale that reflects the risk in this, and that is, if you do a deal with corporate venture capital and it goes badly, they will not quickly make a decision to sever the deal, and you're going to sit there burning cash. We one of my startups, we did a deal with Smith and Nephew. We made the mistake of doing the deal with marketing, who then turned it over to sales, who told marketing to go screw themselves. And because at Smith and Nephew, they're 2 different cultures, we did not appreciate that fact. And so while they sit there and dilly-dally, You're sitting here burning cash. We had to actually go to court to get it back. Anyway, just an aside.
No, Mark, is a great point because be careful about what you give away. In these deals, you don't want to give the store away and have these entities have so many rights that you're really limiting yourself in the future. And try and I've done deals in spine with Medtronic where they want to dip their toe in the water and start with a pilot distribution deal for you, but that makes it disruptive for you if you've got your own network of distributors, independent distributors or direct reps, and there's confusion in the field. There's channel conflict. But if you feel really strongly about the partner, for example, Titan Spine, we started that. They did that with Mazor Robotics, where they started with a distribution deal that moved into $1 billion+ acquisition. Titan Spine, we did the same thing. We knew we needed to get an exit for 3D printed interbody cages. Not 3D printed, but titanium, because everybody was going titanium, and started with distribution, pilot, larger, and then ultimately a 4x return on a $60 million revenue product company. So there's different ways to think about it, but there's definitely warning signals all around to be aware of. So I'm going to spend some time on equity crowdfunding because this is relatively new, and I have very recent experience in running a campaign last year. So I actually learned about equity crowdfunding at an investor conference 2 years ago. It was LSI, I think 2022, and someone came up to me and said, there's this new way that the rules have changed where the government, it used to be that the most you could raise was $5 million. There's two different versions of equity crowdfunding. It's either Regulation CF, which is for crowdfunding, or Regulation A. It used to be the cap max you could raise was $1 million on a CF, which is less stringent requirements, and 5 million. They raised it to 75 million every year for the Reg A back in 2021, and so that opened up a lot of interest in saying, well, maybe this is a possibility. And then there were some orthopedic companies, one in particular, Monogram Orthopedics, went through the pandemic with 3 or 4 equity crowdfunding raises and raised up to $30 million. So it got my attention. But I learned a lot, and I'm going to share this with the group. Just talk about, what is CF versus Reg A+? What's the difference between using a platform like Start Engine versus self-hosting through your own website? What is the process? What are the costs? What are the key success factors? And what are some recent companies that have done it? So CF versus A+, Regulation CF for crowdfunding means you can raise up to $5 million a year. Non-accredited investors are allowed. You don't have to have your financials audited through the GAAP, a GAAP certified audit, which is expensive and timely, especially for a smaller company. You don't have to go through the SEC to get qualified, which takes time and costs money. So it's faster to get started. It's overall a lower cost option to go out there and get your raise out online basically. Reg A+, they have 2 different tiers. Up to 20 million a year is possible through a tier 1 raise, and up to the largest is up to 75 million for a tier 2. The tier 2 is if you think you're going to be very successful and you want to give yourself the option to raise as much as you possible. It does require 2 years of GAAP financial audits, so that you've got to account for the time and the cost to do that. For the tier, I believe tier 1 and tier 2, you do have to get qualified by the SEC. So it's kind of like a mini IPO. It's quite a process, but not as bad. And you have ongoing reporting requirements depending on how much money you raise. So it takes a little longer to get started. and it's more expensive on the upfront cost side. So the difference between using a platform like Start Engine, I call that a equity crowdfunding hosting platform, and they're probably the biggest out there, and you've probably seen them a lot, online. You got Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank as a spokesperson for Start Engine, versus a self-hosted site, i.e., setting it up through your own website. And I'm going to explain what I went through. I actually signed an agreement initially with Start Engine because that's who Monogram went with, and it's in effect an all-in-one solution, because you have to you're required to have these different partners and areas of compliance. When you're raising money online, you have to have a FINRA registered broker dealer, review all of the investors and the transactions before they're approved and done. You have to have a transfer agent to manage, the transaction and keep track of all the shares and the equity. And you have to, probably the most important partner is marketing, because it's heavy, social media. It's all digital marketing, and you got to have the best you can find in that area. So Start Engine offers that in one package to say, we do all of that for you under one umbrella. So it's particularly for regulation CF, it's easier, it's faster to get started, less expensive. They give you an overall fee, and generally it's somewhere probably between 5, 6, 7. It can go up to 10 or 15% of your total raise just to work with the platform, and that's all inclusive. And there might be some additional fees, transactional related fees, and legal fees, on top of that. But the downside, and this is what I learned from my friends at Dealmaker, who Monogram went to for their second raise, was you don't control any of the data. Data is key. Understanding who the investors are, what the age range is, how deep they're going down into your website to look at your material, what material works, what material doesn't. You're at the mercy of the hosting platform, Start Engine, and you're also competing for the attention of investors on that platform against other companies that are on the platform raising. So the analogy is like you're like setting up a pop-up cart or a store within the Start Engine mall, where the investors are browsing for investment opportunities. So you can easy to get lost in all that noise. So the option we chose, for the Dimacron raise was a self-hosted site. And that's basically the analogy is like you're opening your own unique store, or in effect, your website. And all of your various hosting partners, your marketing, investor acquisition partner, if you want to go with a separate, broker dealer, separate transfer agent, can all manage through the Dealmaker. Is kind of like the Shopify to an at-home business. The mom and pop shop setting up selling chocolate chip cookies out of their house. Use Shopify to ship and bill and do all the back end work and do the transaction and the accounting piece. Dealmaker does all that, but they went further. They became kind of like a Start Engine, but allowing you to still have your own site, we were able to have our own invest.dimacron.com site, all managed by Dealmaker. They bought the best of the best in terms of marketing, who did all the marketing work for Monogram, which is why I kind of followed that group over to Dealmaker, and all under one umbrella. They are a FINRA registered broker dealer. They have a transfer agent service. So I chose to go that way and to use them. But you own, the issuer owns all the data. You have that in your control, and with the experts at Dealmaker, they can help you analyze and make decisions on your marketing. You're not competing with other companies to raise capital. So that's kind of why we went that way.
Ted, is the Dimacron crowdfunding site still up, so we can see it as an example? Okay, taken down.
Well, yeah, I think we finished the campaign in July of last year. I haven't looked. It should still be up, where it directs people to say, stay tuned here in case we do a future raise. It's called at invest.dimacron.com.
We'll share that. Okay.
Um, so what is the process? You know, who are the partners required? What's the cost? So I really went to school on this, to learn about this, to learn about platforms, to learn about self-hosted sites, because I had to convince my board of directors, very conservative, group out in Utah. You know, when I first mentioned equity crowdfunding, they're like, Ted, what are you talking about? Kickstarter, GoFundMe? I said, no, this is a new world, guys. It's all digital. It's we got to get with the future. They supported me, but this is what you need. I mean, you need to have an auditor. If you don't already have a good auditor, there are equity crowdfund specialist auditors that do it effectively and less expensively. So I found out who's the best there. But if you just go with your normal auditor, many of them also, lawyers. When I first talked to the corporate lawyers for Dimacron, they didn't want anything to do with equity crowdfunding. It's like, well, you're gonna have to find someone else to work with because that sounds too risky to us. And the auditors were the same way. So, we chose to do a Reg A plus because we wanted to try and raise, 15 million to start. And so it took longer and it was a little more expensive to go through that process. You need lawyers, crowdfunding lawyers, and I kind of learned who the best are. There's one called CrowdCheck that prepare your SEC filing and to keep you, on the straight and narrow with the SEC and all the state filing fees. But that can be another, anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000 to get that done, and then you're going to need probably annually at least $25,000 to $30,000 a year to keep that current. You need a transfer agent, someone to manage all the investor transactions in the shareholder ledger. There's a setup fee, usually somewhere around 10 grand, and then 5 to 10 grand, and then approximately 3% of the raise in processing fees, particularly if more credit cards are used versus bank transfers, which generally they are. That can add up as part of your raise. So equity crowdfunding is an expensive way to raise money. I'll give you my conclusions at the end because we're already just at 3:50 p.m. here at Eastern. Broker dealer, you have to have that. It's $25K to set up. That's another 1% of your total raise. And then number 5 is probably the most important: your marketing, your investor acquisition partner. The group that really are the digital Google ads, Facebook ads, TikTok, YouTube experts about how to find those investors and nurture and bring them in through the funnel and down to a close.
And that's because most of the investors are potential patients, consumers.
Well, that's what we found.
Okay.
At Dimacron, we just found that the message. I'll address that when I get to the slide here. It talks about key success factors. And then investor relations. You have to either have someone internally that pursues the leads on the phone, but you can hire experts that do that and pay for that to really, if you're a small company, you don't have time for this, you need to put that in your budget, but it's an important partner to have. So key success factors. Number 1, before I even get to use good partners, and not that Dealmaker was a bad partner or Start Engine's a bad partner, you really have to have the right product, the right company, the right story, because you're selling to retail, Joe average lunch bucket, Joe Q Public or who's looking to stops their scroll to see something of interest and is interested in giving you anywhere from $500 to $1,500 towards your campaign, and they don't understand the science or anything else. But if you have a good story, the other and so what we found at Dimacron is many of the interested parties were enamored by the artificial disc that we were offering with a new material, because it's clear that it's a better option by eliminating wear debris in a joint versus polyethylene and all these other materials that wear. They really wanted to get it in their own neck. They had degenerative disc disease or a family member and they want to find out, could they get in the study? And so we spend an inordinate amount of time dealing with that, and not so much, having a successful fundraise. So my conclusion, my takeaway from equity crowdfunding is I think it's a good option for life sciences or med tech if you've got more of a consumer-oriented product, like a wearable diabetes monitor system or something like that, where you can build a network of customers, and momentum for your company, that way, but for a more technical product, particularly Dimacron with the class 3 artificial disc that still has to go through and do a PMA IDE, it's not a great idea, and we shut it down after about 6 months. We raised about $500,000 and said we're not going to keep spending the money on this. We tried it. We were trying to follow the footsteps of Monogram Orthopedics, which had a total knee, 3D printed total knee, and a robot system, and they raised all this money over 3 campaigns, but the sizzle worked for them. It didn't work for us. And in the end, if you look at Monogram, I feel they made and the founders may call me after this, because this will be public information now that this presentation will go out there, that they converted to an IPO, on NASDAQ. But strategically, I personally don't think anyone should do an IPO until you're really ready for it and you've got revenue, because you're going to be, beholden to the markets, every quarter to talk about your results, and you could really kill your valuation by going there if you're not ready. But marketing is key to do it. A really strong partner that understands what you're selling and has compelling materials and can give you good data. Keep your offering simple. Just make it ordinary non-voting shares, and communicate. Do webinars. Get out there. Even today, we do a monthly newsletter to our investors. We have, just for that $500,000, we have, I think the number is like 170 different investors, and so we got to keep them informed about what we're doing as a company, so that they don't get upset with you. These are some companies. I mentioned Monogram. Over 4 campaigns, they started with a Reg CF, they went to Reg A+. They started with Start Engine, Seed Invest, they went to Start Engine, then they went to Dealmaker. And I'll admit, I made the mistake of chasing the exciting, story that Monogram, had with the results, and painfully learned it was not for everyone, and I don't think it is today. Joe McGinley runs McGinley Orthopedics, tried it. He's got some he's an orthopedic surgeon in the Mountain States that tried Reg A. He's really struggled. He's got, a special drill and saw, product. Brad Estes is in Raleigh, Durham. He's got a hip surfacing product for Cytex Ortho. They did a Reg CF. I think they did okay, but pretty technical sale, and that's a class 3 device as well. So almost at the top of the hour, I think that's where I finish. And sorry I didn't leave more time for the group to ask questions, but we took a stab at it.
That's a lot of information, great stuff. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. I didn't anticipate that kind of the negative review from your experience, because like you said, Monogram looked like a crazy success with $30 million. And it seems like one of the advantages is instead of a step function of, Series A, Series B, and large tranches, with crowdfunding, you literally see money just drip into your business account every day. It's sort of a streaming money, right? Instead of big events. That's correct. And I think the Reg CF route, it makes more sense. And the key is that maybe you already have some momentum through your friends and family network and people that want to generally jump on and help the early part of the raise.
and that's what the experts say is momentum is key. If they see that there's already some investors, and others jump on. But I've had a number of companies and founders, reach out to me and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about the Reg CF, Ted. What do you think?" And I share what I just shared with you guys, my experience, and it's the various platforms and the people doing these services tell you how simple it seems, and that we manage the raise and you manage the company, but you have to dedicate a good amount of time and effort to it, and money and money. So it's not what I had hoped it might be.
Yeah, go ahead. Mark's up, and then Kyle.
Yeah, do you think the crowdfunding works with tech products that are like software related, AI related, that a consumer patient can identify with? Not too technical, not too arcane. Like I like what you said about the disc being a little over the top, but some other wearables being something that totally could understand. It just made a lot of sense to me. Do you think that they could relate to the technical software side if it's something that is beneficial to patients?
Yeah, as long just like we all here on the pitch decks is crystallize your message so it's really clear, the value proposition, and it's compelling. But the sizzle of tech, that's how Monogram sold their offering so well. They showed the Kukla white box robot that they put their logo on, and they showed it with some guy with dry ice and a fan, showing smoke, literally smoke and mirrors, around this special end effector that they had, and say, wow, it's a robot doing the total knees, and look at the market, look what Stryker and Mako has done to that market, and we're going to totally, turn it on its head. And they started, just the money started flooding in.
Wow,
so that's why I went with that marketing partner. But the sizzle sells online.
Thank you.
Kyle, and then Alessa.
Thanks for this, Ted. So you've been around for a minute here, and you've clearly experienced an awful lot firsthand with these different investment vehicles. I'm sure you've also seen plenty of examples outside of your influence of things that have gone well and things that have gone poorly. Have you mapped out or thought through, with all that experience, what you would I guess, a blueprint for ideal, all things considered, if you were starting from scratch?
Yeah, and that's where I mentioned at the front end of this, that I think of best practices, what I covered this afternoon, which is options. These are the different, routes you can take, and provided some, general experience about that. And really for me, it's been really just the last 5 to 7 years I've been really focusing on fundraising. Before that, I was more in operating roles for companies. But and of course the dynamics change. The dynamics have changed in the last 2 to 3 years, in fundraising. But getting the fundamentals right for your story, and your company, to ensure that you're really, locking down the key important things that you need to have, that you would, as an investor, want to know, that you have confidence in the management team, that their quality system is top notch, their strategy for if it's the regulatory pathway they're using, do they have reimbursement figured out if that's an issue, their commercial strategy, those 4 or 5 things. So I think there's an opportunity, and I'm happy to kind of do that next, is start to map that out, because any one of those things can kill a deal. The first diligence, the first couple of calls they make, and they say, oh no, their quality team isn't very strong, or they really don't have the manufacturing expertise, or they're a small fish in a big pond with a contract manufacturing group, and there are supply chain issues. Just get the fundamentals right, and get that 10 to 12 pitch deck that you have, that you constantly need to adjust, depending on who you're talking to, really nailed down.
Good question. Alessa, hopefully you're not driving.
No, I'm in Carline picking up my son. But a question for you, Ted. So I did a little stint at consulting with a private equity firm, and what they were looking for was, companies where there were less than 5 people that could say no. When you're looking at a crowdfunding option, and there's 14,000 people like Monogram has on the cap table, would that completely eradicate any type of acquisition, or what have you seen?
Well, generally, no, the structure is to do non-voting shares. So they have such a small piece, even though there's a lot of them, that it's not going to affect ability. They're not going to be able to say no in generally. So and that's where the management by the digital, management of these large cap tables, it's scary because, a strategic or a private equity group might look at that and say, that's way too complicated. But if you're dealing with all pretty much on one spreadsheet together with your partner, deal maker, or whoever it is, start engine, it's very manageable. And they basically, all the disclosures are in, and the lawyers make sure that you enforce the fact that read the materials before you sign and invest, because they're basically signing away the rights to say no. But for companies like yours and others that are out there that are starving and looking for capital, not getting it from private equity or not getting it from venture capital or corporate venture, where else are you going to go? So that's where it's like, okay, well, we have to expand our cap table. We have to get creative because, hey, we've got to survive. We have to, resource our business. We need the funds. That's my argument.
It's not unlike a large corporation where you have thousands of employees that have 100 shares. The employees with 100 shares have no voting rights. The board and the large shareholders make the decisions. Any other questions? This has been fascinating. All right. No other questions. It's a wrap, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks, Ted. Great stuff.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good February.
See you, Bone Chatters.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, gentlemen.